The notification sound cut through Stanford's graduation ceremony like a knife through silence. I glanced down at my phone expecting congratulations from my father, Robert, maybe even a rare expression of pride. Instead, the text message that appeared on my screen felt like a punch to the gut. Don't expect help? You're on your own. My hands trembled as I read it again, sitting there in my cap and gown among thousands of other graduates. Sarah squeezed my hand from the seat beside me, her warm brown eyes filled with concern as she noticed my sudden pallor. Her parents, David and Linda, sat on her other side beaming with the kind of parental joy I'd never experienced from my own father. Before I could process the cruelty of that message, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus Thompson, my CFO, never called, unless something major was happening with FlowSync. I excused myself quietly and stepped away from the ceremony, my heart pounding as I answered. What Sarah's family didn't know, what my father Robert had no clue about, was that for the past 4 years, I had been living a double life. While everyone believed I was just another struggling computer science student barely scraping by, I had actually been building something extraordinary. FlowSync, my artificial intelligence logistics platform, had grown from a dorm room startup into a revolutionary company that was about to change everything. It all started during my freshman year when my father cut off my financial support. The moment I switched my major from pre-medicine to computer science, Robert exploded. Computer science, he had screamed over the phone, his voice dripping with disgust. You're throwing away a real career for what, playing with computers? Don't come crying to me when you realize you've wasted your life. That phone call happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I remember sitting in my tiny dorm room, staring at the financial aid forms I'd have to fill out, wondering how I was going to survive. My roommate Jake Martinez walked in that night, finding me slumped over my laptop, completely defeated. Jake was different from anyone I'd ever met. He grew up in Phoenix, the son of a mechanic and a school teacher, but he had this incredible gift for programming that left professors speechless. While other students struggled with basic coding assignments, Jake wrote algorithms that could solve problems none of us had even thought of yet. "What's eating you?" Jake asked, setting down his backpack and noticing my obvious distress. I told him everything. About my father's rejection, about the financial pressure, about feeling like I was disappointing everyone who had ever believed in me. Jake listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as he understood the weight of family expectations. "You know what your problem is," Jake said, finally pulling up a chair next to my desk. "You're trying to prove yourself to someone who's never going to see your worth anyway. Instead of begging for his approval, why don't we build something so incredible that his opinion becomes irrelevant?" That conversation changed the trajectory of my entire life. Jake had been working on some revolutionary logistics algorithms, mathematical formulas that could optimize shipping routes in ways that existing companies hadn't even imagined. I brought the business vision and strategic thinking, while Jake provided the technical genius that would power our platform. We started small, incredibly small. Our first office was the corner of our dorm room, where we set up 2 rickety desks from the campus surplus store. We survived on instant ramen energy drinks and pure determination. While I attended classes during the day, maintaining the facade of being a struggling student, Jake and I would code for 18 hours straight every night. The breakthrough came during our sophomore year. Jake developed an AI system that could analyze millions of shipping data points in real time, identifying patterns and inefficiencies that human logistics managers missed completely. Our beta version saved a small trucking company in Sacramento nearly $30,000 in their first month of using our platform. Professor Williams from the computer science department became our secret ally. He was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had worked at several tech startups before transitioning to academia. Something about our project sparked his interest, and he started giving us access to the computer lab after hours. "Great ideas don't follow university schedules," he would say, handing us his key card with a knowing smile. By junior year, word about FlowSync was spreading quietly through Silicon Valley's logistics community. We had small contracts with regional shipping companies throughout California, and our AI was learning and improving with every dataset we processed. But I kept everything hidden from my family. Whenever my father visited campus, I made sure he only saw me struggling with basic assignments and complaining about difficult professors. The deception wasn't easy. During family dinners, I would listen to Robert brag about his accounting firm's success, while secretly knowing that FlowSync was already generating more monthly revenue than his company's best year. My stepmother Patricia would make snide comments about my lack of direction and irresponsible choices realized, while I bit my tongue and pretended to be the disappointment they believed I was. Sarah entered my life during the spring of junior year. She was a business marketing major with an infectious laugh and a brilliant strategic mind. I hired her as our first official marketing intern, initially attracted to her portfolio of creative campaigns she had developed for local businesses. Working together every evening in our makeshift office, discussing growth strategies and customer acquisition, I fell in love with her intelligence before I even noticed how beautiful she was. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared ambitions. Sarah was the first person outside of Jake and Professor Williams who truly understood what FlowSync could become. She helped us develop our brand identity, created our first professional presentation materials, and provided the marketing expertise that turned our technical innovation into a compelling business proposition. By senior year, FlowSync had contracts with major logistics firms across the western United States. We had hired a team of 12 brilliant employees who worked out of a rented office space in downtown Palo Alto. Our AI platform was saving companies millions of dollars annually in logistics costs, and venture capital firms were starting to take notice. The irony was overwhelming. While my father had dismissed my chosen field as worthless, I was building a company that would revolutionize an entire industry. While he cut off my financial support to teach me about real-world consequences, I was creating more wealth than he could have imagined. And while he sat smugly in that graduation ceremony planning his post-ceremony lecture about responsibility and maturity, I was about to receive the phone call that would change everything. "Neil, you need to sit down." Marcus's voice crackled through the phone as I found a quiet corner behind the ceremony seating. Marcus Thompson was our 35-year-old chief financial officer, a former Goldman Sachs executive who had joined FlowSync 18 months earlier when he recognized the revolutionary potential of our platform. "I'm at graduation, Marcus. This better be important," I whispered, trying to keep my voice down, while parents and families milled around me. "Important doesn't begin to cover this. FlowSync just went public, and the numbers are absolutely insane." I could hear the excitement and disbelief in his voice even through the phone's distortion. "We opened at $42 per share, which was already above our projected range. But Neil, in the first hour of trading, we've hit $87 per share." The world seemed to stop spinning. I had known our IPO was scheduled for today, timed deliberately to coincide with my graduation as a symbolic milestone, but the numbers Marcus was sharing were beyond my wildest projections. "What does that mean for our valuation?" I asked, already doing rough calculations in my head, but needing to hear it confirmed. "FlowSync is currently valued at just over $7 billion, Marcus said, pausing to let that sink in. "Neil, with your 62% ownership stake, you're worth approximately $4.3 billion as of this moment. You're officially one of the youngest billionaires in American business history." I leaned against a concrete pillar, my legs suddenly feeling unsteady. 4 years ago, my father had cut me off financially, leaving me to survive on part-time jobs and student loans. Now, at 28 years old, I had built something worth more than most Fortune 500 companies. "The trading volume is unprecedented," Marcus continued. "Wall Street analysts are calling FlowSync the most significant logistics innovation since containerized shipping. Amazon, Walmart, and FedEx have all issued statements praising our platform's impact on their operations. The financial media is going crazy trying to understand how a company this valuable was operating so quietly. As Marcus spoke, I thought about the contracts we had secured over the past 2 years. Amazon had been our biggest breakthrough, implementing FlowSync across their entire North American distribution network and reporting savings of over $200 million annually. Walmart followed 6 months later, then FedEx, then dozens of smaller logistics companies who couldn't afford to fall behind the efficiency revolution we'd created. Our artificial intelligence didn't just optimize shipping routes. It predicted demand patterns, identified potential supply chain disruptions before they occurred, and coordinated multimodal transportation networks in ways that human planners simply couldn't match. We had essentially created a crystal ball for the logistics industry, and every major corporation wanted access to that competitive advantage. Jake's stake makes him worth about $1.4 billion. Marcus added, knowing I'd want to hear about my best friend's success. Jake deserved every penny. His algorithmic innovations were the foundation that made everything else possible. Standing there behind Stanford's graduation ceremony, phone pressed to my ear, I realized that my entire life had just changed in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. The cruel text message from my father suddenly seemed laughable. Don't expect help. You're on your own. He had no idea that being on my own was exactly what had made this success possible. Sarah and her family were probably wondering where I had disappeared to. I needed to get back to my seat, needed to finish this graduation ceremony that had suddenly become a footnote to the most important day of my professional life. But first I had to process the reality that I was now worth more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. Marcus, I need you to handle the media for now. Don't confirm my exact ownership percentage, but you can acknowledge that the founders are Stanford graduates. I'll be back in the office tomorrow morning to deal with everything else. Neil. Marcus said, his voice becoming more serious. This is just the beginning. With this valuation, every major tech company is going to want to acquire us. Microsoft's already reached out through back channels. This success opens doors we haven't even thought about yet. As I hung up the phone and started walking back toward the ceremony, I spotted my father, Robert, sitting across the auditorium with Patricia. He was checking his own phone, probably reading work emails or stock reports, completely unaware that his supposedly directionless son had just achieved more business success than Robert had managed in 30 years of running his accounting firm. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about the money itself. It was about vindication, about proving that his judgment had been completely wrong, about demonstrating that success comes from following your passion and working relentlessly toward your vision, not from seeking approval from people who can't see your potential. But as I approached my seat where Sarah was saving my spot, I realized that the real test was just beginning. My father was about to discover what I had built, and his reaction would reveal everything about the kind of man he truly was. The moment I sat back down next to Sarah, I could see her concerned expression. "Everything okay with your call?" she asked quietly. Her hand finding mine, as the graduation speaker continued his address about pursuing dreams and making a difference in the world. "More than okay," I whispered back, squeezing her hand. "I'll explain everything after the ceremony." But explaining was about to become unnecessary. As the speaker continued, I noticed a ripple of activity throughout the audience. Parents and graduates were checking their phones, pointing at screens, and engaging in hushed conversations. FlowSync's spectacular IPO was becoming public knowledge in real time. Sarah's father, David, a retired electrical engineer with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, leaned over with his phone. "Sarah, honey, isn't your boyfriend in computer science. Look at this incredible story about a Stanford student who just became a billionaire with some kind of logistics company." David showed us his phone screen displaying a Bloomberg News alert. FlowSync IPO soars 107% in opening hour, making founder worth $4.3 billion. Below the headline was a photograph I recognized immediately. It was from our company website showing me standing next to our first major server installation. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked from the phone screen to my face and back again. Neil. She whispered, her voice filled with amazement and understanding. This is you. This is your company. David's phone buzzed with another alert, this one from CNBC. Meet Neil Harrison, 28, who just became America's youngest self-made tech billionaire. Sarah's mother, Linda, peered over to see the screen, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock as she realized they were sitting next to the person featured in these breaking news stories. Across the auditorium, I could see my father, Robert, checking his own phone with increasing frequency. He was scrolling through what appeared to be financial news, probably monitoring the stock market as he always did. Patricia sat beside him looking bored and occasionally making disparaging comments about the graduation speakers. Two professors sitting directly behind Robert were engaged in an animated conversation that I could partially hear despite the distance. "Can you believe it?" one of them was saying. "That brilliant young man who founded FlowSync is graduating today right here in this ceremony. 28 years old, and he's already revolutionized an entire industry." "I remember reading about his company in the tech journals," the other professor replied. "Their artificial intelligence platform is years ahead of anything else in logistics. Amazon's been raving about the efficiency improvements they've achieved." Robert's head turned slightly clearly, eavesdropping on their conversation. I watched as he continued scrolling through his phone, reading article after article about FlowSync's success, still oblivious to the fact that the celebrated young entrepreneur was his own son. A business reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle approached our row, having somehow identified me from the photos circulating online. "Excuse me, are you Neil Harrison from FlowSync?" she asked politely, holding a small recording device. "I am," I replied, trying to maintain composure, while acutely aware that this conversation was happening within earshot of dozens of other families. "Congratulations on your extraordinary IPO success. Would you be willing to share a few thoughts about achieving this milestone on your graduation day?" The reporter's questions drew attention from nearby families, creating a small crowd of curious onlookers. Sarah's parents watched with pride and amazement as I answered questions about FlowSync's technology, our growth trajectory, and plans for future expansion. "What advice would you give to other young entrepreneurs who are facing skepticism from family members?" The reporter asked a question that felt particularly relevant given my current situation. "I'd tell them that sometimes the people closest to you can't see your potential because they're too focused on their own limitations," I replied. "Success comes from believing in your vision, even when others doubt it, and from surrounding yourself with people who support your dreams rather than diminish them." My classmate Trevor Walsh, who I recognized from several computer science courses, suddenly appeared at my elbow. "Dude, this is absolutely incredible," he exclaimed loudly, his voice carrying across the ceremony seating. "I can't believe you were building a billion-dollar company this whole time, while the rest of us were just trying to pass our classes." Trevor's enthusiastic congratulations attracted even more attention. Other graduates started recognizing me from news photos, leading to a steady stream of people wanting to shake hands and take selfies with the newly minted billionaire in their class. Through all of this excitement, I kept glancing across the auditorium at my father. Robert was now staring directly at our section, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. I watched as he refreshed his phone screen again, comparing news photos to my actual face sitting 60 yards away from him. Patricia noticed Robert's fixation and followed his gaze toward our family section. Even from a distance, I could see her mouth fall open as she put together the pieces of what was happening. The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. My father had sent me a cruel text message telling me not to expect help just moments before learning that I had achieved more financial success than he could have imagined. His son, the supposed disappointment who had chosen a worthless field of study, was being celebrated in national news as one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in American business history. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter as we watched Robert stand up abruptly, his face red, with what appeared to be a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and anger. He said something to Patricia, who gathered her purse with quick, nervous movements. "I think your dad just figured out who you really are," Sarah whispered in my ear. The graduation ceremony was still ongoing, but the real drama was about to begin. My father was making his way through the crowded seating, heading directly toward our section, with an expression I'd seen many times before. The look he got when he felt humiliated and needed to reassert control over a situation. This was the moment I had unconsciously been preparing for throughout 4 years of building FlowSync in secret. The moment when Robert would have to confront the reality that his judgment about my potential had been catastrophically wrong. The graduation ceremony had barely concluded when my father appeared at the end of our row, his face flushed red with what I recognized as barely controlled rage. Patricia followed closely behind him, her usual smug expression replaced by obvious anxiety. They pushed past other families, ignoring polite protests, as they made their way toward where Sarah and I were gathering our programs and caps. "We need to talk. Now." Robert demanded, his voice tight, with the kind of controlled fury I remembered from childhood arguments. He completely ignored Sarah and her parents, treating them as invisible obstacles to whatever confrontation he was planning. "Anything you want to say to me can be said right here." I replied calmly, remaining seated while other graduates and families milled around us. Sarah's father, David, stepped slightly closer, clearly sensing tension and positioning himself protectively near his daughter and me. "Don't be ridiculous," Patricia interjected, her voice sharp with its familiar condescending tone. "This is family business, Neil. We need privacy for this conversation." "Privacy?" I asked, standing up slowly and looking directly at my father. "You mean like the privacy you gave me when you cut off my financial support in front of my entire dormitory? Or the privacy you showed when you called me a disappointment at last Christmas dinner in front of all the relatives?" Robert's jaw clenched, a clear sign that he was losing control of the situation in a way he hadn't anticipated. "Stop being dramatic. We're family, and families work through problems together. Now that you've had this success, we need to discuss how to move forward responsibly." The word success came out of his mouth like he was tasting something bitter. Even now, faced with undeniable evidence of my achievement, he couldn't bring himself to express genuine pride or acknowledgement. "Move forward responsibly," I repeated, letting the absurdity of his statement hang in the air. "You mean like how you responsibly supported my education and career choices, or how you responsibly encouraged my entrepreneurial ambitions?" Patricia stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage a situation that was rapidly spinning out of Robert's control. "Neil, honey, we've always believed in you. Your father's methods might have seemed harsh, but it was all designed to motivate you to achieve exactly this kind of success." The brazenness of her rewriting history was breathtaking. Sarah's mother, Linda, audibly gasped at the transparent manipulation, while David shook his head in disgust at what he was witnessing. "Always believed in me." I pulled out my phone and opened my text messages, scrolling to the message I'd received less than 2 hours earlier. "Is that why Dad sent me this today?" I held up the phone so everyone around us could see the screen clearly. "Don't expect help, you're on your own." A small crowd was gathering around our confrontation, drawn by the raised voices and obvious family drama. Several people had their phones out, apparently recognizing me from the news coverage and realizing they were witnessing a real-time family conflict involving the day's biggest business story. Robert's face grew even redder as he realized other people were listening to our conversation. That message was meant to be motivational, he said, his voice getting louder and more desperate. "Sometimes young people need tough love to reach their potential." "Tough love?" I laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Is that what you call abandoning your son financially?" Is that what you call telling everyone at family gatherings that I'm wasting my life? Is that what you call refusing to attend my academic awards ceremonies because you were embarrassed by my chosen major, Dries? Sarah stood up beside me, her hand finding mine in a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by my father. Robert's eyes narrowed as he looked at her clearly, seeing her as another obstacle to his agenda. Who is this girl anyway? Robert asked dismissively. Is she the reason you've been hiding your business success from your family? Has she been filling your head with ideas about cutting ties with the people who raised you? This girl, I said, my voice becoming dangerously quiet, is Sarah, my girlfriend, and the marketing director of FlowSync. She's been instrumental in building the company you just called a waste of time 4 years ago, and she's shown me more genuine support and encouragement in the past 2 years than you've provided in my entire life. David stepped forward, his engineer's precision evident in how he addressed Robert directly. Sir, I don't know you, but I've been listening to this conversation, and I have to say that your son has achieved something extraordinary. Instead of trying to argue about the past, maybe you should be congratulating him on his success. Robert turned on David with the fury of someone whose authority had been challenged by a stranger. This doesn't concern you. This is between me and my son, and I don't need parenting advice from someone I've never met. Actually, David replied calmly, it concerns me quite a bit, since Neil is dating my daughter, and you're currently berating him at what should be one of the happiest moments of his life. From what I can see, he's accomplished more by age 28 than most people achieve in their entire careers, and he's done it without the family support that most young entrepreneurs rely on. Patricia jumped back into the conversation, sensing that public opinion was turning against them. We're not berating anyone. We're just trying to understand why Neil felt the need to keep his family in the dark about something so important. We want to be part of his success to support him going forward. The hypocrisy was so blatant that several people in the gathering crowd began shaking their heads in disbelief. One of the business reporters who had been interviewing graduates noticed the commotion and started approaching with her camera operator. Support me going forward, I asked, my voice rising slightly. Where was that support when I was eating ramen noodles for months because you cut off my food allowance? Where was that support when I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for textbooks? Where was that support when I needed encouragement to pursue my dreams instead of criticism for abandoning yours? Robert realized that the situation was spiraling completely out of his control. News cameras were now pointing in our direction, recording what was quickly becoming a viral moment of a billionaire entrepreneur confronting his unsupportive father in public. You owe me some respect, Robert said, falling back on the parental authority that had always been his final argument. I raised you. I provided for you for 18 years, and I deserve to be treated better than this. Respect. I looked around at the crowd that had gathered at the cameras recording our conversation at Sarah and her family, who were witnessing the ugly reality of my family dynamics. You're absolutely right, Dad. You do deserve respect. You deserve exactly the same amount of respect you've shown me for the past 4 years. You deserve exactly the same support you provided when I needed it most. You deserve exactly the same consideration you gave my dreams and ambitions. The crowd was dead silent, waiting to see how this confrontation would resolve. My father stood there, realizing that his attempt to reassert control had backfired completely, leaving him exposed as the unsupportive parent he had always been. So here's the respect you've earned. I continued, my voice steady and clear so everyone around us could hear. You're on your own, Dad. Don't expect help. At graduation, Dad texted, "Don't expect help." Then my CFO called about the IPO. And Dad? Within 6 hours of our confrontation, the video had been shared over 2 million times across social media platforms. Someone in the crowd had live streamed the entire argument on Instagram, and news outlets quickly picked up the footage of a billionaire entrepreneur telling his unsupportive father, "You're on your own." in an exact echo of the cruel text message that had started everything. The headline on TMZ read, "Billionaire's Graduation Day Showdown, Dad Gets Taste of His Own Medicine." CNN Business ran a segment titled, "When Family Success Stories Turn Ugly, the Cost of Cutting Off Support." Forbes published an analysis piece exploring how parental rejection often motivates entrepreneurial success, using my confrontation with Robert as a case study. Sarah and I spent the evening at her parents' house, sharing dinner and watching the story explode across every major news platform. David and Linda treated me with the warmth and acceptance I had always craved from my own family, asking thoughtful questions about FlowSync's technology and celebrating my achievement without any ulterior motives. "You know," David said over dessert, "Linda and I have been talking and we want you to consider us family now. Not because of your success, but because of who you are as a person and how you treat our daughter." Their genuine affection stood in sharp contrast to the chaos erupting in Robert's life. By Monday morning, the fallout from our public confrontation was devastating his professional and social standing in ways he never could have anticipated. Robert's accounting firm Harrison and Associates had built its reputation on serving established businesses throughout the Bay Area. His client relationships depended heavily on trust, professionalism, and maintaining a positive public image. The viral video of him berating his billionaire son while trying to take credit for success he had actively opposed was destroying those carefully cultivated relationships. Marcus called me Tuesday morning with updates he was hearing through business networks. "Neil, your father's biggest client just dropped his firm." Henderson Manufacturing's CEO issued a statement saying they don't want to work with someone who demonstrates such poor judgment in family relationships. They specifically mentioned that any parent who would abandon a child pursuing education should be questioned in their business decision-making. The social consequences were equally severe. Robert had been a member of Hillcrest Country Club for 15 years, where he played golf with other successful businessmen and cultivated the professional relationships that sustained his practice. After the video went viral, those same golf partners began treating him like a pariah. Patricia called me Wednesday evening, her voice shaking with panic and desperation. "Neil, you have to do something about this media coverage. Your father's business is falling apart. People are treating us like we're monsters. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand." "Patricia," I replied calmly, "I didn't create this situation. I simply responded honestly. When Dad tried to take credit for success he had opposed every step of the way. The media coverage is reporting exactly what happened using Dad's own words from the text message he sent me. But people don't understand the context," she pleaded. "They don't know that Robert was trying to teach you independence and self-reliance. They're making him look like a terrible father when he was just using tough love to motivate you." The irony wasn't lost on me. For 4 years, Patricia had been Robert's most vocal supporter when he criticized my choices and cut off financial support. She had actively encouraged his harsh treatment, suggesting that I was spoiled and needed to learn hard lessons about real-world consequences. Now that those same tactics were being exposed to public scrutiny, she was desperate to reframe them as loving parental guidance. "Patricia, if Dad's methods were so effective and well-intentioned, why are you ashamed to have them discussed publicly? If he was truly trying to help me succeed, shouldn't you be proud to have his parenting approach examined by others?" She had no answer to that question because we both knew the truth. Robert's treatment of me had nothing to do with motivation or tough love. It was about control, disappointment, and his inability to accept that my path to success didn't match his narrow expectations. Meanwhile, FlowSync was thriving beyond all projections. The publicity from the graduation confrontation had brought unprecedented attention to our company, with major corporations reaching out to explore partnerships and licensing agreements. Microsoft made a preliminary acquisition offer worth $12 billion, which Marcus and I decided to decline because we believed our independent growth potential was even greater. Jake had been fielding calls from venture capital firms wanting to invest in his next projects, while Sarah was being recruited by major tech companies, impressed by her marketing work at FlowSync. The three of us were becoming Silicon Valley celebrities featured on magazine covers and invited to speak at business conferences across the country. The contrast between our rising success and Robert's falling reputation created a stark illustration of how treating people affects long-term outcomes. While he was losing clients and social standing because of his demonstrated character, we were gaining opportunities and respect because of how we treated employees, partners, and each other. Robert's secretary, Nancy, quit on Thursday, unable to handle the constant stream of reporters calling for comments and the hostile reactions from former clients who were terminating their contracts. Two more major accounts canceled their services that week, specifically citing the viral video as evidence of poor judgment and character. By Friday, Robert was facing the possibility that his accounting firm might not survive the reputational damage. The business he had built over 20 years was crumbling because people judged him by the same standards he had used to judge me: results, character, and how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. The difference was that when I faced his judgment and rejection, I channeled that pain into building something extraordinary. When Robert faced public judgment for his actions, he had no foundation of genuine relationships or goodwill to sustain him through the crisis. 6 months after graduation, I was reviewing quarterly reports in FlowSync's new headquarters when my assistant informed me that Robert had called requesting a meeting. Our company had moved into a stunning 50,000 square foot facility in downtown San Francisco, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Bay Area. FlowSync now employed over 300 people, and our AI platform was being used by logistics companies across 4 continents. The irony of my father asking for a meeting wasn't lost on me. For 4 years, I had tried to maintain a relationship with him despite his constant criticism and lack of support. He had never once asked to meet about my business, never shown interest in my work, never offered encouragement or advice. Now that he needed something from me, suddenly he wanted to talk. I agreed to meet him at a small coffee shop in downtown Palo Alto, the same area where I had first rented office space for FlowSync during its early growth phase. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where we could speak privately, uncertain about what to expect from this conversation. Robert walked in looking like a man who had aged 5 years in 6 months. His usually confident stride was replaced by hesitant steps, and his expensive suit couldn't disguise the weight loss and stress lines that had marked his face. He spotted me immediately and approached the table with an expression I had never seen before: genuine humility. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said quietly, sitting down across from me without his usual commanding presence. We ordered coffee in silence, both of us understanding that this conversation would determine whether we had any kind of relationship going forward. I waited for him to speak first, curious to see whether he would continue trying to justify his past behavior or finally acknowledge the reality of what had happened between us. "My business is gone," Robert said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Harrison and Associates filed for bankruptcy last month. I lost everything, Neil. The house, the cars, the country club membership, most of my savings. Patricia left me 3 months ago and moved to Florida with her sister." I listened without comment, noting how different he seemed from the confident, judgmental man who had raised me. This was the first time in my adult life that my father was being completely honest about his circumstances without trying to maintain some facade of superiority. "I know you probably think I'm getting what I deserved," he continued, looking down at his coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. "And maybe you're right. I've had a lot of time to think about the things I said to you, the way I treated you. And I realize now that I was completely wrong." This admission surprised me more than anything else he could have said. Robert had never been capable of admitting mistakes or acknowledging that his judgment might be flawed. Hearing him accept responsibility for his actions felt like listening to a different person entirely. "I was jealous of you," he said, finally looking up to meet my gaze. "That sounds ridiculous, a father being jealous of his own son." But that's the truth. After your mother died, I felt like I had failed as a husband and a father. I couldn't save her, couldn't protect our family from that loss, and I took out my feelings of inadequacy on you. The mention of my mother caught me off guard. Helen had died of cancer when I was 12, and Robert had never been able to talk about her death or its impact on our family. He had married Patricia 2 years later, seemingly eager to replace the loss rather than process it. You were so close to your mother. Robert continued, his voice becoming emotional in a way I hadn't heard since her funeral. She believed in your dreams, encouraged your interests in technology, supported whatever made you happy. After she died, I felt like I didn't know how to be that kind of parent. I only knew how to be critical, how to point out problems and demand improvements. So you decided that cutting off my support and discouraging my career choice was good parenting. I asked, not with anger, but with genuine curiosity about his reasoning. I convinced myself that making things difficult for you would make you stronger, more resilient. But the truth is, I was angry that you succeeded without needing me. I was angry that you proved me wrong about everything. And I was angry that you built a relationship with Sarah's family that looked like the kind of closeness I had thrown away with my own son. This level of self-awareness was completely new from Robert. For the first time in our relationship, he was taking responsibility for his choices and acknowledging their impact without making excuses or blaming external factors. The hardest part, he said, was watching the video of our confrontation and seeing myself through other people's eyes. I looked like exactly what I was, a bitter man trying to take credit for success he had opposed. I looked like someone who had failed at the most important job in his life, which was being your father. We sat in silence for several minutes while Robert composed himself. I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected: sympathy for the man who had caused me so much pain. Not sympathy that excused his behavior, but understanding of how his own grief and insecurity had led to choices that hurt both of us. I don't expect forgiveness, Robert said finally. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me after everything I've put you through. But I needed you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, and I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. Not because of the money or the fame, but because you had the strength to succeed despite having a father who failed to support you. This was the conversation I had imagined having with my father for years. But it was happening under circumstances I never could have predicted. He wasn't apologizing because he wanted something from me. He was apologizing because he finally understood the damage his behavior had caused. What are you going to do now? I asked, genuinely curious about his plans. I'm not sure, he admitted. I'm 58 years old, starting over with very little savings and a damaged reputation. I'll probably have to find work with another accounting firm, assuming anyone will hire me. It's humbling to realize that the success I was so proud of was built on relationships I destroyed with my behavior. Looking across the table at my father, defeated and genuinely remorseful, I had to make a decision about what kind of person I wanted to be. Sarah and I had talked about this possibility many times, discussing how I would respond if Robert ever approached me with genuine accountability for his actions. I have an opening for a staff accountant at FlowSync, I said quietly. It's not a senior position, and you'd be working under our current finance team, but it's honest work with good benefits, and it would give you a chance to rebuild your career. Robert's eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like hope. Neil, I couldn't ask you to do that. Not after everything that's happened between us. You're not asking, I replied. I'm offering. Not because I owe you anything, and not because I'm trying to rescue you from consequences you created for yourself. I'm offering because I believe people can change, and because my mother would have wanted me to choose forgiveness over resentment. I would earn my place there, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. I wouldn't expect any special treatment or try to use our relationship for advancement. I would just be grateful for the opportunity to prove that I can be different. I know you would, I said, extending my hand across the table. Welcome to FlowSync, Dad. 2 years later, I stood at the altar watching Sarah walk down the aisle in her grandmother's vintage wedding dress, her radiant smile making everything else in the world fade into background noise. The ceremony was held in David and Linda's backyard garden, surrounded by blooming roses and the people who had supported our relationship from the beginning. Jake stood beside me as my best man, while Sarah's sister Emma served as her maid of honor. In the third row, my father Robert sat quietly in his best suit, the one he had purchased with his first FlowSync paycheck. He was thinner than he used to be, his hair now completely gray, but his eyes held a peace that had been absent for most of my childhood. Beside him sat his girlfriend Margaret, a kind elementary school teacher he had met at a volunteer literacy program where he spent his weekends teaching financial literacy to low-income families. The transformation in Robert's character over the past 2 years had been remarkable to witness. He arrived at FlowSync every morning at 7:30, worked diligently without complaint, and treated every colleague with the respect and kindness that had been missing from his interactions with me during my youth. He never mentioned his relationship to me at work, never tried to leverage our family connection for professional advantage, and gradually earned his co-workers' respect through consistent performance and genuine humility. Our personal relationship had healed slowly, built on Robert's consistent actions rather than promises or apologies. He attended every FlowSync milestone celebration not as the CEO's father, but as a proud employee celebrating his company's success. When Forbes featured me on their cover as Entrepreneur of the Year, Robert framed the magazine and displayed it in his modest apartment, but he never mentioned it to his coworkers unless they asked directly. During the wedding reception, Robert approached the microphone for his father of the groom speech, something I had initially been uncertain about including in our ceremony. Sarah had encouraged me to give him the opportunity, believing that public acknowledgement of his growth would complete the healing process for both of us. Good evening, everyone. Robert began, his voice steady but emotional. 2 years ago, I was probably the last person Neil thought would be standing here tonight celebrating this wonderful milestone in his life. He paused, looking around the garden, filled with our friends, colleagues, and Sarah's extended family. I spent most of my son's adult life being the kind of father that pushes children away instead of drawing them closer. I was critical when I should have been supportive, judgmental when I should have been encouraging, and absent when I should have been present. The audience listened respectfully as Robert continued with characteristic honesty about his failures and growth. Neil succeeded not because of my parenting, but despite it. He built an extraordinary company, found the love of his life, and maintained his values throughout incredible success, all while dealing with a father who failed to provide the support and encouragement every child deserves. But here's what I've learned over the past 2 years. It's never too late to become the person your family needs you to be. Neil could have written me off permanently, and he would have been justified in doing so. Instead, he chose forgiveness and gave me an opportunity to prove that people can change. Robert's voice grew stronger as he reached the heart of his message. Working alongside my son at FlowSync has been the greatest privilege of my professional life. Not because he's successful or wealthy, but because I've been able to witness daily the character, integrity, and leadership that Helen and I always hoped he would develop. The mention of my mother brought tears to several guests' eyes, including mine. Robert rarely spoke about Helen publicly, but when he did, it was always with the deep love and regret that had shaped so much of his behavior over the years. Sarah, Robert said, turning toward my new wife. You're gaining a husband who will always prioritize your happiness and dreams above his own ego. You're marrying someone who knows how to build something lasting and meaningful, whether that's a business, a relationship, or a family. He raised his glass as he concluded, To Neil and Sarah, may your marriage be built on the same foundation that made FlowSync successful: mutual respect, shared vision, hard work, and the wisdom to surround yourselves with people who believe in your dreams. The applause was warm and heartfelt, recognizing both the message and the remarkable journey that had brought us to this moment. As Robert returned to his seat, I realized that his speech had captured something essential about second chances and the possibility of redemption through consistent change. FlowSync had grown beyond our wildest projections. Our AI platform now managed logistics operations for companies across 6 continents, employing over 800 people and generating annual revenues exceeding $2 billion. We had declined multiple acquisition offers, choosing instead to expand our impact by developing new applications for our technology in healthcare distribution, disaster relief coordination, and sustainable supply chain management. But the business success, significant as it was, paled in comparison to the personal growth and relationships that had emerged from our journey. Jake had become my closest friend and business partner, someone whose loyalty and brilliance continued to drive innovation at FlowSync. Sarah brought strategic vision and marketing expertise that helped us build a brand known not just for technological excellence, but for ethical business practices and employee well-being. 6 months after the wedding, Sarah and I established the Helen Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs from difficult family backgrounds. We provided mentorship funding and, most importantly, the emotional support that many brilliant young people lack when pursuing unconventional career paths. Robert became one of our foundation's most effective volunteer mentors, using his story to counsel other parents about the long-term impact of their support or rejection. He would meet with families where parents were struggling to understand their children's entrepreneurial ambitions, sharing hard-earned wisdom about the difference between protective guidance and destructive criticism. I learned too late that a parent's job isn't to protect children from failure, he would tell other fathers and mothers. Our job is to give them the confidence and tools they need to recover from failure and keep pursuing their dreams. When I cut off Neil's support, I thought I was teaching him independence. What I was actually teaching him was that his family couldn't be trusted when times got difficult. The foundation's work brought me into contact with hundreds of young entrepreneurs who shared similar stories of family rejection, financial abandonment, and emotional manipulation disguised as tough love. Many of them had achieved remarkable success despite these obstacles. But all of them carried scars from the people who should have been their biggest supporters. Through these interactions, I came to understand that my story with Robert wasn't unique. It was part of a larger pattern of how fear, disappointment, and misguided parenting approaches destroy family relationships while failing to achieve their intended goals. The parents who cut off support thinking they're building character usually create resentment and distance instead. The ones who criticize dreams as impractical often push their children away permanently. But I also learned that forgiveness and reconciliation are possible when someone demonstrates genuine change over time. Robert's transformation wasn't instantaneous or easy. It required consistent actions, honest self-reflection, and a willingness to earn back trust through daily choices rather than grand gestures. As I reflected on everything that had happened since that cruel graduation text message, I realized that Robert's rejection had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible: the motivation to prove that success comes from internal drive rather than external validation. His lack of support forced me to develop resilient self-reliance and the ability to find encouragement from people who genuinely cared about my well-being. The $4 billion in my bank account was meaningful, but not as meaningful as the relationships I had built with Sarah, Jake, the FlowSync team, and eventually with my father, after he learned to treat me with respect and kindness. True wealth isn't measured in financial assets, but in the positive impact you make on other people's lives and the love you give and receive from those closest to you. Standing in my office one evening, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, while reviewing foundation applications from young entrepreneurs seeking support, I thought about the message I would want to share with anyone facing similar family challenges. Success is the best response to rejection, But forgiveness is the best response to genuine change. Don't let other people's inability to see your potential limit what you attempt to achieve. Surround yourself with people who believe in your dreams, work relentlessly toward your vision. And always remember that the opinions that matter most are the ones that come from people who truly know and love you. My relationship with Robert would never be what it might have been if he had supported me from the beginning. But it became something valuable in its own way, proof that people can change, that families can heal, and that choosing forgiveness over resentment creates space for growth that benefits everyone involved. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about business strategy, technological innovation, or financial management. It was about the power of treating people with dignity and respect, especially when you have the advantage in a relationship. When someone has hurt you and later needs your help, you have a choice. You can respond with the same cruelty they showed you, or you can demonstrate the character you wish they had shown you. I chose character, and that choice gave both of us the chance to become better people than we had been before. What choice would you make if someone who had rejected your dreams later needed your support? Have you ever experienced family members who couldn't see your potential until after you proved them wrong? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content, and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about second chances and the power of forgiveness. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your current circumstances don't define your future possibilities. Keep believing in your dreams even when others don't believe in you.